Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We are a small and mighty group today, but we were keen to push on with this session. We have delayed it once before, so thank you all for joining and those late few that have come in and registered. A couple of new people on today, so just for your benefit, we do generally put you on mute so we can record the session, but Kim will bring you off mute, I'm sure, during the webinar for any questions or feedback that she needs from each of you. We do record the session, so I will send it to you all after the webinar, but we also upload it onto the IAC YouTube channel and our website for anybody that wants to listen to the recording. With that, Kim, I think I'll hand over to you and it's all yours.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Kate. Glad to be here. Excited, I think, about talking about handling objections. It's maybe not everyone's favorite topic, but or favorite thing to deal with. I guess that it could be a great topic and just a more difficult thing to deal with. But I'm hoping after our hour of time together today, very brief time, that we will at least give you some tools of how to handle that better, give you some skill around how to have more confidence maybe in handling those objections, and just in the end, creating better conversation, I think, with our customers, which I think is really truly the skill that we need to develop when it comes to handling objections. So as we go through our short time together today, we're going to introduce you to a tool called Leap. I'll walk through exactly what that looks like, but Leap is going to help us close the gap between our customer expectations and those realistic solutions. And I maybe want to change our mindset just slightly today to actually think about objections being a good thing. Like, it's a good thing when our clients object. In fact, I think it's a buying signal. Because if they weren't intending to buy, or if they didn't want to buy, they wouldn't bother objecting. Like, why would they? They would just, kind of get rid of us quickly and tell us all the things we need to hear to just get us off the phone, and then they would just never call us back again. And so I feel like when they object, there is this sense that they still want to move forward, but there is this hesitation, there is this unanswered question, or in some way their expectations haven't been met. And that's something we actually want to know. Because in order for us to move past that, in order for us to move past that no, past that hesitation, we have to overcome that. We have to understand what that hesitation is. And so the objection is giving us a chance to still sell and still win the business. But how we handle that moment is going to be crucial. And I would beg to say that how we handle the moment is almost as important as whatever solution or alternative or whatever conclusion we come to when we overcome the objection, because how the customer feels when they're dealing with us is an important element in their willingness to move forward. So we're going to take a look at how the customer feels. We're going to take a look at how important it is to understand what the customer values, because if we don't know what's important to them, it's hard for us to start creating alternatives around what we can't give them. If there's something we clearly can't give them that they want, how we're going to move past that by understanding the things that are most critical to their program, to their event, whatever the case is. Ultimately, our goal is to move past that no and to close the business. I do believe that hesitation is a normal part of the buying process. If you've ever bought anything in your life, right, especially if it was expensive, you ponder a bit and you think, can I afford this? Should I be spending this money right now? Should I be doing this? And so that's normal. And we need to let that be normal with our customers in that buying process. But that's where our expertise jumps in, and our ability to navigate that conversation and pull them through to that sort of natural conclusion of buying is where we really set ourselves apart sellers. Because remember, if we were just taking the order, we would just, they'd call, they'd say, this is what they want. Oh, I can do this. Oh, I can't. Oh, thank you. I'm not going to order today. Or we step in as sellers and really demonstrate that salesmanship that we know that we have, and then we can move towards no and close that business. So what I'd like to hear, though, first is from you. What are some of the most common objections that you're hearing from your customers with two S's today? That's a unique kind of customer with two S's that we have here today. So what are the most common objections? And you can just put those into the chat. So if you find your menu there on the top or bottom of your screen, you'll see a little message bubble that says chat underneath it. So just open that up and just drop in there a quick text as to what are the most common objections you're hearing from your customers. Or you can just unmute too, and you can tell me live, and we can just talk through this. What I'd like to do is hear as many of your objections as you encounter so we can tackle them today. We can dig into them and try to navigate for you what that might look like and what we can do to make that better. So I'm just going to try to figure out, we have a little background noise. I'm just going to try to figure out exactly where that might be coming from. I'm just going to mute the lines for now. And then when we have a chance to talk again, I will unmute you. How about that? All right. So I'm hearing a few about rates. Yes, I'm not surprised to hear that rate is right up there as the first thing that anybody responded to. So we will certainly tackle rate. Lynn has also mentioned, I don't think it's Lynn there today, maybe it is Lynn, space not all being in the same building. Francine says we don't have things within walking distance, so some things. And then Francine also says location not close enough to the airport. Marilee, desirable dates unavailable, size of venue too small. All right, so we have a couple really good ones here that I think are pretty transferable probably to most of you when you think about some of the things that you were experiencing. And even if that's not the exact objection you hear, there are similar ones, because how we would handle any objections about our specific product could be handled in a very similar fashion. And some of the things we're going to think about how we dig into that are going to be similar to that. So we're going to look at those. So thank you for sending those in, and I'll have you come off mute here in just a little bit, and we'll actually talk about those in more depth. But first, we want to talk about a couple of things that are critical when it comes to handling objections, and that is most importantly that we focus on the customer. Remember, when there's an objection, there's a problem, it means their expectation has not been met. So in Francine's case here, they thought it was going to be closer to the airport, or they wanted it to be closer to the airport, and it's not. So their expectation is not met, right? They have their heart set on this, they're excited about this, and it's like, oh gosh, we really needed it to be closer to the airport. I think we can understand that disappointment or that frustration or that sense of, oh shoot, that's not going to work as well as we thought it was going to be. Or as Lynn said here, space not all in the same building. That's an unmet expectation where they thought they were going to be, or their vision was that they were going to have all this event or all these programs and things together closely related, and now that's not really going to work out. So it is an unmet expectation. And what's important in those unmet expectations is we meet the customer where they are, because oftentimes when we're reacting or responding to objections, we're coming at it from our own perception, from our own point of view. And from our own point of view, we're feeling defensive. We're feeling like nervous that we might lose the deal. We're feeling maybe unconfident about how to handle it. And so that puts us in a very defensive posture. And we're in a defensive posture, we're going to respond differently than we would coming from a posture that says, if I were that customer, I would understand their disappointment that the location is not close to the airport. If I were the customer, I too would probably be disappointed if I couldn't have all the space in the same building like I sort of envisioned in my mind as I was putting this event or program together. And so it's important that we focus on the customer, we come at it from their perception, because their perception is their reality. Sometimes their perception is a little, unrealistic, but it is the reality that they're in, and that's what's real for them. And so we have to be in that reality to be successful. Thirdly, then, it takes a lot of creativity to solve problems, right? Francine cannot move her hotel, her conference center closer to the airport. She can't do it. I don't think she can, right? Francine, can you? I don't think so. So she doesn't have exactly what they want. And so she's got to come up with a better solution, a creative solution to work through this little roadblock that this customer had as their expectation around where her location was going to be. Same with Lynn. We're going to have to work through and get creative about the space because they expected it to be all in the same building and we don't have that. And so that's where the creativity comes in, our ability to solve the problem. We can't just say, no, I can't have that. Or we can't just start explaining, well, this is why we don't have it, but this is why you don't want it anyway. Because sometimes we do that, if you will be honest. We start to explain it in a way that says, that is really not that big of a deal. So if you just see it our way, this will be just fine. You won't have to worry about it. So we need to focus on the customer. We need to work from their reality, their perception. We need to be creative to work through these unmet expectations. And so that means that we, of course, an objective way, focus on them. It gives us ability to see both sides. We have a much more other person focus than just focused on us. Because again, immediately, Francine or Lynn, when they hear these things, Marilee with the desirable dates not being available, we go, oh, right. And we get a little tense. And when we come from that point of view of, oh, we're going to focus just on ourselves, or that, we get a little more judgmental, we get blinded. Whereas if we're looking at it from their point of view, we can have a little bit more sort of can-do attitude, so to speak, to work through that situation. So as I mentioned, we're going to introduce you to LEAP, and LEAP first starts with listening. And so listening is one of the most important things we can do when it comes to handling our customers' objections. And listening means, as you can see here, often being silent, right? Listen and silent are the same letters. Did you know that? Not till now. Didn't even think about that. Listen and silent are the same letters. And so often for us, particularly as salespeople, we like to talk a lot. We like to sell. We like to explain. We like to convince, persuade, whatever. And oftentimes when it comes to objection handling, we just need to sit back and just let them talk and let some of the conversation start evolving before we start jumping in. And so this seems really easy to listen. Like I would say, just listen, right? It seems really easy. But in reality, I think if we were honest, we don't really do this very well, right? We don't pay attention. We're often thinking about what we're going to say next, particularly in this situation with an objection, because we're kind of on the hot seat, right? We got to fix something. And so we immediately start thinking about what we're going to say. So when I say listen and be silent, I mean, don't talk, but also silence this. Silence the mind, silence the brain that's in overdrive right now, trying to figure out the solution to this problem, and listen without judging, right? Don't start making judgments. Don't start making assumptions. Just listen to what your customers are saying, because they're saying so many things to you that we don't really hear, and so many things that are going to help us actually resolve this problem a whole lot more effectively. So don't interrupt, don't minimize, don't start explaining why a certain thing is a certain way and why it's not that big of a deal that we're not that close to the airport, or that we don't have all the space in the same building. Don't start jumping into the solution too quickly. Just listen to what they're saying. And listen is going to be, there's going to be a couple more steps here even before we start talking, honestly, so that we can really get a sense of that. So LEAP stands for listen, empathize, ask, and produce. And so we're going to walk through each of these 4 elements, because this is truly a communication tool to help us navigate this situation when we're encountered with an objection from our customers. So we talked about listening, right? Listening is the first and most important step. We talked about not interrupting. We talked about being silent. We talked about active listening. This active listening shows that we care, shows that we are interested in them, shows that we're paying attention. And so sometimes that's difficult when we're on a phone, because a lot of those cues I would give someone that I'm listening to them would be eye contact, would be nodding my head, would be a certain posture that I would take that shows I'm intently listening. Plus, if I'm face to face with you, I can't be multitasking, so I have to be listening to you in many ways. But it's also kind of silencing that mind. So really just paying attention. We have a tendency on the phone, on virtual, whatever, to be doing a lot of things, to be already starting looking up answers. Just pause and listen to what they are saying. There's so many things that they can say to you that are going to help you really cue into how we can resolve the problem. And often, of course, we are much more interested in what we are going to say next rather than really listening to what that particular client is saying. So listening is that first and most important step. Sometimes that takes practice. Sometimes it takes intentionality to make sure that we are really cueing in to what our customer is saying, because the listening is going to go a long way and them just feeling like we understand. But then we have to show them we understand. And so the next step is empathy, right? So anyone come up to you quickly, what does it mean to empathize? When I say empathy, what does it mean to empathize with somebody? Francine, Marilee, Katie, what does it mean to empathize?
It means to put yourself in their shoes and understand what they're trying to communicate to you.
So to put yourself in their shoes, right? And so Francine, can you see where your clients would be disappointed that the location is not near the airport? Could you put yourself in their shoes and feel that for them?
Absolutely.
Could you understand maybe that things were more expensive or the rate was going to be higher than they expected? Could you put
I can understand it. I wouldn't like it, but I can understand it.
Right, of course we wouldn't like it. And when we empathize, right? So thanks, Francine. When we empathize, and Marilee said too as well, see issues from the client's perspective. This is all about perception. And so it's not just seeing it from their perspective, but it's acknowledging that you heard that. So it's a vocalization, it's an expression of the understanding or the fact that I can understand where your perspective is. I don't have to agree with it, as Francine said, I don't even have to like it, but I do have to empathize. And so some very key phrases to show empathy would be to say, I understand your concern about the conference center being too far from the airport, or I could see you're concerned about the rates and it's being out of your budget. I can appreciate the fact that you would like to have everything in the same building, right? So I demonstrate that empathy, not just by I understand or just thinking in my mind, I can get that, but I actually express it to the customer. And when I express it to the customer, it's going to help them feel heard. It's going to help them feel understood, and likely will change the entire tone of your conversation. Because a lot of times the objections get more tense, or handling them, I should say, gets more tense because we get defensive or we start explaining. And when the customer doesn't feel like, no, you're not getting me, I understand. Maybe you think it's not a big deal, but it's still a big deal to me. They have to keep fighting because they feel like they're not being heard. So it's going to change our conversation when they hear you say, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I can understand your concern about the rate, or I can see that you are disappointed that all the space may not be able to fit in the same building. Or I can understand your concern or disappointed that the venue is a little smaller than you expected, right? I am not agreeing with them that my venue's too small. I am not saying, gosh, you're right, our rates are way too high, right? I've been trying to tell them a long time, it's just not, no, it's not even apologizing. You don't have to apologize. Our space is our space. Our location is our location. It's perfect for some people. It's not going to be perfect for everyone. So there's no apology necessary. There is no agreeing necessary. To empathize just simply means I hear you. And so using some of those phrases like, I understand your concern, I can certainly understand the importance of the size of the venue. I can certainly see you're disappointed that the dates are not available for you today, or that you're frustrated about that. So always taking that feeling with the fact, right? So the feeling alone, I understand, or I can see, sometimes sounds a little empty. But if we take that feeling and match it with the fact, I understand that you are disappointed about the size of the venue, or frustrated about the rates, or concerned about the rates, or concerned about the dates not being available. When we accompany that feeling with the fact, then we're really validating what they're saying to us. And in doing so, it's going to open up the conversation. It's going to make sure that we have the opportunity to share with them what we need, what we can do. So the empathy is the second step, excuse me. So just quickly though, before I move on, and Francine or anybody else, Marilee, what makes empathy hard? Why is it hard sometimes to empathize with our clients? You can put it in the chat. You can come off mute. Why would it be hard to empathize?
One reason is because we have goals ourselves, and we fully understand the services that we provide and it's worth it. So that's why we try to sell it without discounting anything, but mainly because I have goals and I need to achieve my goals.
You want to achieve your goals. So that's what's driving you. That's your perception, right? Your perception of what your goals are impacting your perception of the situation. And so then we kind of jump in, and it's hard sometimes to go, I can see you're disappointed about this, when you're like, are you crazy? This is the best deal going, or we are the best location there is. Or so in our mind, we're kind of thinking they're crazy. And so if we're thinking they're crazy, it's probably going to come out a little bit sometimes that we feel like they're crazy. And that's not going to create a really good dynamic for trying to work through a solution. Now, Marilee's also added that sometimes the client can have extraordinary demands and requirements. Yes, sometimes they want it all, do they not? They want it all, and they want it for free a lot of the time, or for a very low price. And so again, it seems outrageous. And when it seems outrageous, it's very hard for us to express that empathy. But I want to urge you how critical it is to your success to do that, to move through to being them comfortable saying yes rather than no, means they have to be comfortable with you. Like they have to feel like they can trust you, and whatever solution or alternative you're going to come up with, or whatever higher rate you're going to make them pay, part of it is them trusting you, as you said, Francine, that we really are the best, right? And that we really do have value. And so a piece of that is that credibility and trust that they have. Well, that will not necessarily be there if they don't feel connected to you, if they don't feel like you genuinely have their best interest in mind. And so that empathy piece helps you to bridge that gap with them so that they feel like I'm in this with you, right? And in the end, I do want to partner with you. In the end, I do want this to work. It doesn't mean I'm going to give you everything you want. And that's where I think we need to get past. Just expressing empathy doesn't mean I'm going to give you everything you want. It just means I can see where you're coming from. And then hopefully, because I can see where you're coming from, we're going to be able to work a conclusion to this that'll be more of a win-win for both of us. And I'm not just going to give in to what you want. So even though we empathize, going back to Marilee's comment here, even though we empathize, doesn't mean I'm going to give in to everything that they say, or that I think that their demands are not extraordinary or outrageous. It just means I can see where you're coming from. I may be giggling a bit inside, but I can see where you're coming from, and I'm going to make sure that we work through that. So that is the empathy piece there. So then the next step is to ask, right? Ask questions. Notice we're not offering a solution yet. And oftentimes we're ready. We're ready to just jump in and fix this baby and get this moving on and get this business closed. We need to ask questions. We need to make sure that we truly understand what the holdup is, what the hesitation is, not make any assumptions about that, not make any assumptions based on what other clients have said, or even our own perception again. A lot of times we're making those assumptions based on our own perception. And so we want to just step back a bit here and ask the question. So our first goal in asking questions is simply to clarify the understanding, just to make sure we really get what they need, and also help explore some options, because as we ask them questions, we're going to find out more about what their needs are, about maybe the particular attendees, about maybe the scope of the event or the program, which will maybe help us come up with alternatives to what they're asking, where we got to get creative with those solutions, but we got to start exploring those options. And when they get engaged with that, they're going to buy in much more to those alternatives or those solutions that you're going to propose, because we asked them, what can you tell me more about that? Can you share with me, or can you walk me through exactly the different events you want to do and what your vision was for how the space is going to be, and get a better sense of that so we can move forward. The second part of asking, I feel, is it kind of validates that empathy. And natural empathy is going to lead to questions in a very natural way. And think about it this way. You actually probably leap with your friends and family all the time, quite intuitively, quite naturally, because we care about them, because they're important to us, and we do have genuine concern for them. So if something comes up in their life that's a problem, a conflict, an issue, we listen because they're important to us. We show empathy. We say, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. You know, we would show that empathy, and we would ask questions naturally, not because we're trying to fix anything for them or because they're asking for our input, but because naturally, if we didn't, it would sound sort of disingenuous. So I have a really good friend right now, actually, whose son is going through some difficult times. He's senior in high school. Coming up in senior in high school, he's kind of got some depression going, a little anxiety. It's very new for him, very difficult. It's very difficult for her as the mom. I've had a son who's gone through that, and so she shared that with me, and so we talked through that. And she comes and she shares what's going on with Tanner, and my natural feeling is, oh, Jen, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. I'm sure it must be super difficult as a mom. That you're just so worried about him. Empathy, right? It's natural. I would do it because she's my friend and I care about her. And then I'd probably ask her questions, not because I'm going to diagnose the kid's anxiety or anything else, or because I'm any sort of expert, but because I care. Because if I just said, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that, I'm like, well, I got a great idea for a doctor for you, or have you tried this? It would sound like I'm not really listening to her. But if I engaged her and said, oh gosh, tell me how he's feeling. I'm so sorry. Have you talked to the teachers? Have you explored any options? How are you doing through all of this, right? I would ask those questions, which would make her feel like I care, because I want to know more. I want to engage with her. I want to get to know her better and her son because they're important to me. So we leap all the time, I think, most of us, with our friends and family, because we have that genuine care, that genuine connection with them. So that's what we want to create with our customer. We want to create that genuine sense that we are here for them, that we are there, we have their best interests in mind, and we do indeed want success for them. And so that empathy that says, I understand that you are concerned about the venue being too small. Can you tell me a little bit again about what you are planning so we can look at what some possible options are going to be? And then we get some more input from them. And then hopefully we get a few more questions answered. And then we can move toward offering some alternatives or offering a different recommendation for them as it relates to them. So that's all going to lead us to the produce. It's all going to lead us to eventually offering some sort of solution for them, some recommendation, some next step, an alternative, whatever it is. It may be the same thing you offered the first time. Who knows? It might be, you may not have some flexibility. Like, I don't have any, like, I can't move my hotel or conference center, right, Francine? I can't move it to a different place. So I can't change that. But I can maybe offer some alternatives that are going to help make the distance different or better or easier, or some solutions around transportation or things like that. So that next step solution is what we're going to offer to them. And again, it may be not any different than you would have offered them before you empathized or asked, but how it's going to sit with them, how it's going to land with them is going to be much more well received because of the communication and the exchange that you've had with them that makes them feel like, okay, maybe this is the alternative, or maybe it's not so important to me to have everything in the same space. Now that you've really listened to me, I feel like I can trust you to recommend some other alternatives, and I'm going to be open to that. That's what'll happen as we kind of dig in and have this great conversation with our customers. So we want to listen to what's been said. We want to empathize with what has been heard by demonstrating that empathy out loud. We want to ask questions, and then we want to produce a solution. So let's walk through a couple of these a little bit live together. So a few of you said rates. Let's see. So Francine said rates. I think, is it Kay Housen? I don't know who that is. I first name there. So we'll go with that. Right? Yeah, there we go. And who else said rate? Anybody else say rate? Okay, just those two. All right. So Francine, if you don't mind coming off mute again, let's talk about this rate being too high. All right. So when we are faced with a rate objection, and what often specifically would your customers be saying to you? Like how would they express that their rate feels too high to them? What do they say?
Oh, well, it depends. Some of them will just come out and say, oh, that rate's too high. We've never paid that much before in the past. And sometimes the past is comparing rates during COVID to rates out of COVID, so that's something they don't understand. And then also it could be like I have groups that have had meetings at campsites, which rates are a lot less than at a hotel. So, so they're transitioning from that to this and they're shocked. Shocked.
Okay. So let's just walk through this together and try to leap through this together. I'm going to be your customer. You're going to be yourself. And I'm going to tell you your rates are too high. And then I want you to walk through how you would respond to that, trying to use leap. All right. So Francine, that rate seems really, really high. That is higher than anything we have ever paid for any other program we've ever done before.
Oh, Kim, I totally understand your concern about our rates being high. Do you mind if I ask, what is it specifically about the rate that you would have an objection with? I don't know if that was a good question, but
All right. Well, it's just higher than anything we've ever paid before. It's just not in the budget that we talked about. And so it's going to be a bit of a push, I think, for us to try to get this through.
I don't know, Kim, I'm kind of stuck now.
What about asking them what their budget is? So you can start crafting an event that will meet that.
Is it Amy, right, Amy? All right, so that's a good question. What is your budget? All right, anybody else can pipe in here and let's walk through this. What other questions could you ask about rates?
Well, I could ask, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What was included with your pricing structure at your camp center or what was included in that rate, or what were you buying? Can you explain to me like what was included at the venue?
Excellent. And maybe to even get to that first, what have you paid in the past? Where have you been in the past? what was included with that, right? Those types of things. Because if they're dealing with past perception of what they paid before, we can't just go, well, oh my gosh, you wear campsites before. Let's get first, like, where were they? What did they pay? What was included? And then we can start to differentiate how it will be different with us, but then why? Why is it going to be different? Why is it going to be more money, right? We have to kind of lead them gently to that place where they almost start to realize it themselves. If you start asking the right questions, they're going to start figuring out like, oh yeah, COVID, we were camping, we didn't have any of that included. We didn't really have any tables or linen. Like they might naturally kind of figure it out themselves, maybe. But part of that conversation will help do that. And that's where we have to be that really skilled, sort of curious person that's going to guide them through this almost naturally. So when we get to, well, here's what we can do for you, they're going to feel much more open to that, kind of realizing like, oh, yeah, I guess maybe we couldn't really compare apples to apples there with that. So any other questions you could ask about rates? So what is their budget? What have they paid in the past? Where have they been in the past? What was included with that? If it's not a past thing, it's maybe more they're looking around. You could say, well, who else are you looking at now? And what have they included? So you can get a sense that. Another really fantastic question to ask with rate is, in addition to a competitive rate, what else is important to you? What else is important to you? Because,
not only,
yeah, but
I was going to say not only that, but then also having that discussion of what would they have liked to add to their last? What was missing? How could we improve upon that? Because then I can get them to expand that budget
yes,
outside of.
exactly. Because I can't guarantee, but I would bet that almost every single one of you on this call has bought something that was a little more expensive than you wanted to pay. Yes? A little bit out of the budget, a little bit. Yeah. And why did you? You're shaking your head, Lynn. Why did you?
It helped.
Because I
Right.
needed it. It benefited me. It benefited me at the end of the day. So I paid the extra money.
Right. I wanted those shoes. I wanted that couch. I wanted that new car. I wanted it. So somewhere along the line, somebody helped create that desire for you. Somebody helped articulate that why you'd want to spend a little bit more, and they got you excited about that, right? And so that's what we have to do. As Francine said way at the beginning, like, I know what we have and they just don't see it, and that's frustrating to me. Well, we can't just go, well, this is what we have, why can't you see it? We have to lead the horse to water to go, well, what is really important to you, or what was missing, as Amy said, and what you've done before, or what else besides the rate is important, because then I can start building the value up, right? When they see the value, they'll pay the rate. I guarantee people will spend more money than they allocated if they feel like this is the best place for us. Like, I gotta have it, as you said, Lynn. So I gotta have this. So I'll pay for it, or we'll figure it out, or we'll move the money around in some other way. I'll go back to my boss and I'm gonna say, this is the best place for us. But we are the ones creating that desire for them. We are the ones that are gonna help them see the difference in the rate other than what's on paper, because what's on paper, a lot of us are never going to win by what's on paper compared to who we are competing with. So we've got to be able to step in and share and be able to communicate that value to them. But value is going to be based on what they want, what's important to them, what they are looking for. And when we can create that value for them, then we're going to be able to move beyond that rate objection, and they're going to want it. And then they're going to pay for it. And that's what's going to be exciting when we're able to do that. And so that's where our skill as a salesperson really steps in. Like, we can't just go, oh, sorry, we can't afford that. Or you really got to see that this is worth it. Like, we have to navigate that conversation. And that's where LEAP really helps us build our confidence around how we're supposed to respond. We don't have to have an answer right away. We don't have to give in right away to that rate. We don't have to concede to that. We just say, thank you for sharing that. I can see you're working within a budget. Can you please share with me? And then any of the questions that we already before. So that's where we're going to go. All right. So what if we're dealing with something else? Let's go to Lynn. So you have, Lynn, space not all in the same building, right? So let's just talk about that specific objection and how we would work through that with LEAP. So just give me a little high level, like, what's the biggest concern most customers have around the space And how
If
is it spread out? Or,
Yeah, it's spread out. It's not in the same building. My guest rooms are in one building. My meeting space is in the next door building, but it could be hot outside and could be inclement weather. And I'm worried about, time to get from, a breakout session that might be in one building to the other. What else do I hear all the time? It's on an up above floor. It's not on the same floor. And it just, it's like herding cats. It's going to take too long for my participants to get from point A to point B.
Nope.
And how can you help me fix that?
There's a lot of things there. Excellent. All right. And so a lot of things that we think like, I don't know what I'm going to do about that. Like, it's true. It's true. They're in different buildings. It's true. It could be hot and therefore kind of uncomfortable to walk. It's true. It's going to take them more time to get from one place to another. It's true that they maybe not going to have the connection they would have if they're all in the same building. Like, all of it's true, right? Potentially true, right? All right, so let's walk through LEAP with that one, because we can LEAP, right? Even these situations where you feel like there's really no answer. So let's go through this. I'm going to express that concern to you, Lynn, and I'm going to have you respond with LEAP as best you can. So Lynn, I'm a little concerned because it seems like it's pretty spread out here. The guest rooms are in one building, buildings are another. It's going to be hot in the middle of July and a lot of walking back and forth. I just feel like that's going to be a lot, just not quite a great experience that you're hoping to have for this program.
I understand that you have some concerns surrounding the location of your general session space. If it's raining or inclement rain, a thunderstorm, we provide umbrellas that kind of help assist you staying dry if you had to head outdoors. Because your group, go back to this. Okay, so I've listened, I've heard, and I understand that the meeting space is not in the same building with the guest rooms. But based on the group size of the number of attendees, our largest meeting space just so happens to be right next door. It's literally a 3-minute walk over. Is there any other design or reset or setups we could do, and we could find another space in the building with the guest rooms that we could work around? Sorry, I got off tangent, but
You're good. But you caught yourself there.
Yeah.
Because you caught yourself. We listened to Lynn, we heard him, he expressed the empathy. I'm sorry that you're concerned about that. It could be rainy, it could be inclement, whatever. The part you missed, but you did catch yourself and came back to, was the asking.
Yes.
Everybody noticed how we went right to the explanation. If you go right to the explanation, it just feels like an explanation. It feels like you're trying to excuse it away and they're not listening. They're not listening at that point because you haven't engaged them in that. So you went back to say, which is a good question. I'm trying to figure out where that noise is coming from. Anyway, you asked a pretty good question. So let's go back to what we could ask here. And you said it was kind of around, could we go with a different design? I would open that to a different question to go, tell me a little bit about the design or flow or how you see things going. Just get that question open. Like, it may not be the perfect solution yet, but we start to hear what their vision was around that. And then from there, we can ask follow-up questions and try to get to the solutions that you have, because there are some alternatives. Great, the umbrellas. I have the perfect room. It's actually right next door, but you want to get them to talk about themselves first. The more they talk about themselves, the more they get to express how they're feeling about everything, the more they're going to be like, oh, I guess you really hurt me. And then the more open they're going to be. So excellent, you caught yourself. And all of us, as you listened, I hope you sort of caught that too, where Lynn went right from the empathy to the producing. That's our habit. That's how we've been selling all along. That's what we're responding objections all along. And maybe not, maybe you've heard of it before, maybe you have your own technique, but that's typically where we go, is right to the, here's what I can do, and start explaining why it's either not going to be that big of a deal because I have an umbrella, or I'm trying to sell something right away. And so we want to make sure, as we're positioning that solution, that we've engaged them with those questions first. So there is a very natural flow to this. You can't listen, then produce, then empathize, then ask, or listen, then empathize, then produce, then ask. There's a very clear flow. I mean, this is a step, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And so Certainly you might get to the empathy and then asking, and then maybe you empathize again and ask again. You might go back and forth a little bit based on what they're sharing with you. And then you produce a solution, and then maybe you need to go back again and kind of dig in if they don't really like it still. But that's going to make them much more amenable to what you have recommended. And then the umbrellas seem like a good idea. And then the short distance, because you have this ideal venue picked for me, will seem much more plausible, because I've been able to express to you that my really concern about this. And I feel like you actually heard me and listened, and it wasn't just this canned answer that you give to every single other person that ever complains about the space, because clearly you've heard it 100 times before, right? And that's our goal. Our goal is to make every client feel like this is the first time we've ever had this conversation, and I'm really in tune to you. You're important to me, and I have some really creative ideas for you to fix this, but I want to wait to hear what you have to say first to make sure that we do that. And that's what we're going to do. All right. Do we miss any others that are sort of close? We could go back to Francine's location, and you also have not distance. Let's go to Mary Lee about dates being unavailable. That seems a tricky one too. So Mary Lee, if you want to come off mute, let's just talk about that really quickly. How would we leap our way through desired dates unavailable? Is this like the initial dates, like we're proposing the program, initial dates aren't available? Can you find your mute button there, Mary Lee?
Typically, I will ask if they have any alternative dates.
Okay.
That they could conduct their meeting. If they have any alternative, even types of agendas with regard to their meetings. In other words, do they always have their meetings in one event, or have they had their meetings in separate events previously?
Okay. And so you got right to the questions, which are great. And so that would be the first best question, of course, is are you flexible? Do you have alternative dates? And start going that way. How would we empathize with this first? How would we express empathy about dates not being available?
Oh, I certainly hear that you have a goal and a timeline to conduct your meetings. I understand how important that is. Do you have any flexibility? Would you happen to have any flexibility in your dates?
Very good. And you see how often that empathy is going to naturally just lead you right to a question, right? I can see that you're disappointed, the initial date's unavailable. Let me ask you, do you have any flexibility with the date? And then it just opens up the conversation. The more we can make the questions open-ended versus closed, the better. Now, certainly flexibility, it's pretty much a yes or no question, and that's a question we have to ask. But even back to with Lynn a few moments ago, rather than saying, would you go with a different setup? He would say, what setup are you looking for? What have you done in the past? Whatever, to get more conversation going and make those questions very open-ended. And so really, it's pretty simple when you think about it. It's just kind of rewiring our brain to not go right to trying to offer that solution right away. Is to show empathy first, ask a couple of questions. Sometimes if we don't have any idea what to say, for empathy, we can just simply say, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that with me. Like if I don't how do I empathize with this? Or in questions, you could just say, well, can you tell me more about it? Just tell me more about what you were worried about or concerned about. And then that'll hopefully, prompt some other questions from you or just get some discussion going. The idea with LEAP is that it is not going to, give you put your conference center in a different location than it is. It's not going to make your venue any bigger. It's not going to make Mary Lee's dates suddenly appear that aren't available. It's not going to make Francine's, distance where they have to walk any shorter, or the rate any lower. It's not going to do any of that, right? And it can't. And oftentimes we don't have any answers, like that's it. But what LEAP is going to do is open up conversation with your customer in that moment and get you more likely to a solution that you're both are going to agree to and want to do. And they're going to feel more connected to you. And so that's what LEAP does. It's really just about the communication. It's really just about the conversation that's hopefully moving you toward removing that hesitation, answering those questions that they have, working through solutions of some of the concerns that they had, and moving them closer to saying yes. Our goal is to just get them to come. They have to feel comfortable saying yes, even though the space is spread out. They just do. They have to get comfortable saying yes, even though we're further from the airport than they want it to be. They have to feel comfortable saying yes, even though our venue's smaller, rooms are smaller, have to walk a long way. They have to get comfortable saying yes, even if the rate's too high. And if we're going to do that effectively, LEAP is going to help us to get there, because there is no magic. None of those things are going to change. The only thing that can change is the customer's perception of the problem and their willingness to move forward, even though they're not going to get what they want. And that's where you come in your ability to communicate and them to be successful. All right, I don't know where that little chime is coming from. I'm going to just try to mute everyone to see if I can eliminate that noise. Okay, here we go. So of course, after then, we leap through that, and after Lynn's offered his umbrellas and that he has a venue right next door that's going to be really easy for them. After we've offered the rate that we're going to offer, whatever it is, we want to check in. Say, how does that sound to you? Will that work? How does that meet your expectation? Do you have any further concerns? Do you have any further questions? We want to check in, 1, to get agreement, 2, to make sure there aren't still any hesitations, right? This is like a trial close. If we feel like we resolve this concern, we're going to be more likely to be able to move toward the close at this point. And it's a great time to move to a close after you've overcome an objection, because now they're feeling pretty positive about what can happen or what the result is going to be. So you want to check in and make sure you want to flush out any further hesitation, right? We don't want to move to a close until we feel like they don't have any questions left, they don't have any hesitation, and they're likely to go forward. So if we get here and it's like, I'm not really sure, I'm still a little bit concerned, we go back and we leap again. I can see that. Can you share with me what your additional concerns are, or what your boss is going to be concerned about, or whoever? Like, make sure we're flushing it all out so that we have that opportunity. If we let them get by with, yeah, it sounds good, I think it's fine, and they hang up, we know we're never going to hear from them again. So make sure that when you have them on the phone, or you have them on Teams or Zoom or wherever you're talking to them, that you keep that conversation going until you feel like all of that has been resolved. Now, we've kind of already addressed the price objections that came up right away. Again, most often with price, it's often something else, not price, right? And they're not seeing the value, as we talked about, in what you're offering. And so we got to figure out what those other issues are. It's far easier for them to say the price is too high than to say, I don't really like your conference center. I don't like your location. I don't like you. Like, I don't really like working with you. It's far easier to say, I think it's out of our budget, and then just get out of it, right? And move on, and then never talk to you again. So oftentimes it's not price, it's that they just haven't seen the value in your price yet. And so we got to get to what those real issues are that are keeping them from moving forward, or keeping them from that sensation we all know we've had, like, I got to have it even if it is a lot more money expecting to spend. It's worth it, it's worth the value, so on and so forth. So that great question again, if you didn't write it down before, is, in addition to a competitive price, what else are you going to base your decision on? We want to know what they value so that we can then indeed give them what they want. So I'm just going to stop sharing for just a moment and just kind of open it up. Any questions, any other objections that we want to try to tackle? Any like, no, Kim, that's just not going to work for me. So anything else that we can just kind of tackle here today with you? Do you think it will work? I mean, what would be hard? What do you think what might be hard about LEAP, if anything?
Getting them on the phone in the first place.
Well, in the first place, for sure. That's a whole nother session.
I know.
That is a whole nother session for sure. But I think partly with that is, again, even in the conversation, if it's email or whatever we're trying to do back and forth, if we can be leaping during that point to show them, I'm really concerned, I just want to ask you a couple of questions so I can better understand this. I'd really like to work through this with you. I think if they can feel that, they might be more likely to pick up the phone too. So even before we get to them, I think we can start doing a little bit of that leaping. So yeah. Anything else? No other questions? No other big heated objections that we can handle in the time that we have left? All right, well then let's just wrap up and kind of walk through this. So again, the key is to don't talk over the customer, right? Don't jump in with all those explanations. Don't jump in with all of our, reasons and rationale why this actually is going to work and that they're just crazy, right? Use leap, handle all those objections in the moment and flush them out, like ask for them. We don't want anyone to get off the phone with us feeling like, that's not going to work. So if you're going through your sales process and you haven't heard any objections, you definitely want to say, do you have any concerns? Are there any questions I can answer? Give them the opportunity to share that. Not that you're inviting controversy or a difficult situation, but if you want to win the business, you got to overcome it. And if we can't overcome it, it's something we don't know about at that point. So make sure that you're asking and soliciting those to get them fleshed out. Listen to them and take a lot of notes. I don't remember what I said 5 minutes ago. I surely don't remember what you said 5 minutes ago. I would never remember what most of you said, even back to the beginning of this webinar, if I didn't write it down. I wrote down all the objections you had. I wrote down the things that you said as we went back and forth with our conversation, because then I can go back and I can refer to that. The same way with our customers. We want to take notes on what they're saying. When we're having conversation with them, when we're reiterating things that we've heard, the more we can use their own words, the more they're going to connect with us. So take a lot of notes. Take a lot of notes as you're doing the sales process, as you're uncovering their needs. Take a lot of notes on the things they're saying about what they're most disappointed about, and exactly what they're saying, because then you can go back to that specifically and have success around that. Remember to show empathy. It's not apathy. It's not an apology. It's not admitting any things are wrong, bad, ugly, good, whatever. It is just saying, I hear you. I hear you and I understand. And it conveys to the customer a willingness to work through a solution and a willingness to partner with them. Again, a big part of their willingness to go forward is their trust in you. And if they feel like you have their best interest in mind, they're going to trust you more. So empathize first, ask a lot of questions if necessary. Maybe a lot of questions aren't necessary. Maybe one question gets them to open up, you get a better sense of things, and then you can move on. So basically just ask questions and do all of that before you offer the solution. And that'll be a habit for many of you to break. And so one thing I would encourage you to do, as we don't have time to do this together in this setting, is to practice. To get 3 of you together and one of you plays the customer, one of you plays yourself as the salesperson, then you have an observer. And the reason you have an observer is to keep you honest in what you're doing. So practice throwing objections to one another. So if Lynn and Francine and I were together, I'm going to be the customer, Lynn's going to be the salesperson, Francine's going to be our observer. I'm going to throw my objection to Lynn, and Lynn is going to practice leap. If he does what he did earlier, I'm not calling it out, but just because we're human nature, goes right from empathy to producing, then Francine will go, hold on, time out, you just jumped a step. And then we start over. And that having that observer there will help give us that immediate feedback to help us break some of those habits that we have. And it's not bad, it's just natural. It's just what we've been doing for so long. It's going to be hard to create that new habit. So having that person there to go, oh, time out, start over, will give us that chance to practice again and practice again and practice again. So don't be afraid of that. I know nobody loves to role play, but we should be practicing throwing objections at one another. Otherwise, we're practicing on the customer, and that's not always going to have the best alternative or the best result. So make sure we're practicing with one another to create that success for ourselves. And then finally, we just have to know also when to walk away. You know, not all customers are our customers. And when you said Mary Lee earlier, sometimes their requirements are demanding and outrageous. Like, you have to know what not only your walkaway price, but any like non-negotiables. And so that's a conversation you want to have with your leader pretty regularly to know, kind of know your negotiating power, sort of know, what autonomy you have to go higher, lower, whatever, when it's going to be too low. And then what else might be of value to us in that relationship? So if they're asking for this low rate and we really want the contract, well, in some cases that's a win-win for us. And so it might be worth it to go with a lower rate, but maybe it's because they have the potential for other business. Maybe it's they have other divisions of their company that we would want to get into. And so sometimes there's a win-win in other ways, but we got to know what those things are. So we have to know what is valuable to us. We have to know what's valuable to the customer. We have to be prepared to say, we can't go any lower, or we can't give in to those demands, and make it okay to say, it's just not going to work. It's just not the right. Because I feel like if you have to persuade somebody too much about your value, it's likely a sign that they're a bad fit. So back to Francine's group, who's been in the campgrounds, like maybe this just isn't the right fit for them, right? It's just not going to be ever something that can fit in their budget, and they're going to have to rethink what their expectations are around that. But we don't have to just keep going low, 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 low to make it fit, just because we want the business. Because really, again, for us, you know, if we go back to just sales 101, like we should be prospecting to find the right business that is willing to pay our rate, is willing to be a best fit for our, you know, our venue, our center, whatever the case is. So it all fits together. I don't have to take this lower rated business. I don't have to give in to these demands and some of these inquiries, because I feel confident that in my prospecting, I'm going to go out and find the best business that's going to be a good fit, that I'm not going to hit all these objections that I'm getting from some of these. So that's how it fits into the bigger picture about what we're trying to accomplish as a seller, to make sure that we're preserving our rate integrity, we're preserving just the overall value of our properties, of our conference centers, of our hotels, and that we're advocating for that all along. So any final questions before we sign off today? No? Well, thank you so much for your participation, for your attention, for your engagement. Hopefully this was helpful. And even though we don't love handling objections, I hope and trust that in the last 58 minutes, we were able to get you to a place where you feel a little bit more confident, where you have some skills around how to open up that conversation that will hopefully lead to better win-win solutions with you and your customers. So thanks so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks very much, Kim.
All right, thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.